running was a way to release stress, to escape the routine, to clear my mind from everything that weighed me down. But never in my life did I imagine that a simple run with a little dog would lead me into the most terrifying fear I've ever known. My name is Michael. I'm 17 years old, and what I'm about to tell you happened less than a year ago here in Charleston. Even now, I struggle to sleep, and every time the memories surface, something deep inside me twists. It all started with something that seemed harmless. Mrs. Thompson, a neighbor from our block, asked me to walk her dog Molly in the afternoons. She was a whirlwind of energy and needed to run to keep from tearing up her house. The deal was simple. I'd take her out for about 40 minutes and she'd pay me $10. For me, it was a steal. Run, make some money, and hang out with a friendly dog. What could possibly go wrong? Of course, I said yes without hesitation. But something caught my attention right away. Mrs. Thompson, with her always soft voice and tired eyes, gave me a warning. Michael, don't go toward the northern trail, the one that cuts through the old road. It's dangerous. Stay near the creekside. It's safer. I didn't think much of it. Grown-ups tend to exaggerate. The first day was just fine. Molly pulled hard. I tried to keep up, and the evening air was cool. The trees cast long shadows over the pavement, and the sky turned a deep shade of red. There was something beautiful about running as the sun set, like the world held its breath for a moment. Honestly, I felt everything was perfect. But if you love scary stories, subscribe and hit that bell, because what happened next still haunts me every night. That week went by without anything strange. I ran, Molly had fun, and I felt at peace. Until Friday, when something shifted. Maybe it was the silence, or that strange feeling in the air, but something made me question whether I should stick to the usual long route, or, just out of curiosity, try the northern path. That day, Molly pulled harder than usual. It was like she wanted to go somewhere else, like something was calling her, and that's when, without thinking much, I decided to take a different path, the one Mrs. Thompson told me not to take. And that's where it all started. The northern trail wasn't like the other paths I was used to. The ground felt looser, like no one had walked there in a long time. Tall trees lined both sides, forming a kind of natural tunnel that barely let any of the fading daylight through. At first, Molly seemed thrilled. She sniffed everything, wagged her tail like crazy, and I felt a bit silly for having avoided that route for so long. But as we went further, I noticed something odd. There was no wind, no birds, not even the usual hum of insects that always accompanied my runs. Only the sound of my footsteps and Molly's heavy panting broke through the silence that was starting to make me uneasy. Still, I kept going. I told myself it was all in my head, that I was just spooked because of Mrs. Thompson's warning. But every time I looked down the trail, I had this feeling that something was watching me. I couldn't see it, couldn't hear it, but I felt it. Like the air was getting thicker. We ran for about 20 minutes on that path, which seemed to stretch longer than usual. Every now and then, I looked over my shoulder, though I wasn't sure why. There was no one, not even cars in the distance, just the dirt, the trees, and that cursed silence. Molly began to slow down, like she too sensed that something was off. Then something strange happened. We reached a bend where the trail widened a little, and right there at the edge, I noticed the ground had been disturbed, like someone had dug there recently. It wasn't big or deep, but it stood out in all that stillness. I stopped for a second, and so did Molly. We just stared at that patch of disturbed earth. Something told me we should leave, but I didn't move. Molly acted first. She pulled hard forward, and I started running again. I wanted to leave that image behind, that uneasy feeling. But as I did, I realized something else. The sun was setting faster than usual, and the trail was getting darker, like it didn't want us to leave. As we ran, I started to feel like the trees were closing in, the air turning colder. I looked at Molly, who wasn't pulling anymore, but seemed like she wanted to go back. My mind was racing, but I couldn't stop thinking about that disturbed soil and the feeling that someone, or something, had been following us since we stepped in. That's when I understood that this run wouldn't be like the others. Something was waiting for us, and it didn't want us to leave that trail so easily. It was almost completely dark when Molly suddenly stopped again. Her body tensed, ears up, and she let out a growl I had never heard before. It wasn't like when she saw another dog or a cat. It was a low, deep growl, like she was warning me about something I couldn't yet see. I held her leash tightly, trying to calm her down. "Easy, Molly, it's okay," I whispered, but truthfully, I was more scared than ever. I followed her gaze, fixed between the trees about 30 feet ahead. At first, I couldn't make out anything, just branches, shadows, and the darkness growing thicker. But then I saw it. Between two trunks, barely lit by the last rays of the sun, a face peeked out. A pale face, eyes wide open, staring at us without moving. I froze. I couldn't see the details, but it was impossible to ignore. It wasn't my imagination. Someone was there. I blinked, and the figure vanished, like it had never been there. A chill ran down my spine. I felt like the ground beneath my feet turned softer, less stable. Molly started pulling backward, desperate to leave, and though every part of me screamed to run, I forced myself to walk slowly, never fully turning my back on where I had seen that face. As we moved away, the silence grew even heavier. I couldn't hear my own breathing, just the pounding in my head and the shaking in my legs. I didn't want to look back, didn't want to see if what I'd seen was still there. I just wanted out of that damn trail. But with every step, I felt eyes on me. I don't know if you've ever felt that invisible gaze that pierces through you, like it strips you bare, like it knows everything about you. That's what I felt, that whoever was out there knew I had ignored the warning. We reached a small clearing in the path, where I could see the dim glow of a streetlight ahead. I felt a bit safer, thinking we'd soon be in a better place. But then I heard something that made me stop cold. A faint crack, soft but clear, right behind us, like someone had stepped on a twig. Molly turned with a sharp bark, and I spun around, heart pounding in my chest. There was nothing, just the empty trail and the shadows of the trees. But I knew we weren't alone. I picked up the pace, almost without thinking. I felt like the faster I moved, the quicker I could leave behind that darkness closing in on us. Molly stayed by my side, but she wasn't pulling like before. It was like she too knew running wouldn't save us. The trail finally joined a wider path where the trees weren't so thick. I felt a wave of relief, but only for a second, because just as I turned the corner, I saw him. He was standing by a thick tree just a few feet away. He didn't move. He was just there, like he'd been waiting for us. A short man wearing a heavy dark jacket, which made no sense with the warm evening weather. He wore an old hat that covered most of his face, but even then, I could feel his eyes piercing through me. Molly froze, lowered her head, and let out a low whimper, like she'd been struck without being touched. I was frozen. I didn't know what to do. My legs wanted to run, but my mind was blank. The man didn't say a word. He just stood there. His body seemed too stiff, like he was part of the tree itself. His arms hung at his sides, but something in his hands caught my eye. I couldn't see clearly, but I swear he was holding something metallic that glinted faintly in the remaining light. I wanted to speak to him, to ask what he was doing there. Maybe he was someone from the town, maybe he was just passing by, but the words wouldn't come out. My throat burned dry, like someone had stolen my voice. Molly started backing away, pulling me by the leash, and then finally I reacted. I began stepping backward, not turning my back on him, keeping my eyes locked on his. And then the man slowly lifted his head. I could see his face, though only slightly. His skin was so pale it looked sickly, and his eyes hollow, as if there was nothing inside them, as if he existed only to watch and to frighten. I grabbed Molly's leash tighter and turned, ready to run, but I didn't hear anything behind me. No footsteps, no sound, just the whisper of the wind through the trees, as if telling me I never should have come there. I don't know how we made it back to the crossroads of the trail, but when we did, Molly bolted with all her strength toward the main road. I ran behind her, not daring to look back, and when I finally felt we were safe, I made up my mind never to return to that place. I thought it was over, that after escaping that cursed path, nothing else would happen. But I was wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those empty eyes, that lifeless skin, and the strange object that glinted in his hands. Molly was restless too. She wouldn't stop pacing around the house, occasionally letting out a whimper and staring at the door, like she was waiting for someone to come in. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was all just a coincidence. Maybe the man was a drifter, someone lost in the woods. But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, something inside me knew it wasn't true. He wasn't an ordinary man. He was something else, something that didn't belong to this world. I decided not to say anything to Mrs. Thompson. I just handed Molly back to her and thanked her for the opportunity. She looked at me with a kind of sadness, as if she knew I wouldn't be back. "You took the Northern Trail, didn't you?" she asked suddenly. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. She looked down and sighed. "I told you not to." For several days I tried to go on with my life. I started running alone again, but only through the well-lit streets near my house, always crowded with people. But no matter how far I stayed from that trail, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. Like by stepping into that place, I had awakened something that wouldn't stay in the woods. One night, I decided to run later. I thought maybe if I faced the fear, I could free myself from it. I went out around 8, the city already dim, but the streetlights gave me a sense of security. I ran along the main avenues, but before I realized it, my feet had taken me close to where it had all started, and that's when I heard it. No, more like I felt it, because there was no sound. It was as if something moved behind me, matching my every step, but without making a noise. No leaves, no branches, not even breathing. Just a void surrounding me. I stopped dead, trying to listen harder. I looked back and there was no one. But my body knew something was there. I could feel that gaze again. The same one that had followed me on the trail. I quickened my pace, running faster than usual. And every time I sped up, that something did too. I couldn't see it, I couldn't hear it, but I knew that if I stopped, it would be right in front of me. And in that moment, I understood. The fear wasn't just in those woods. I ran aimlessly, guided only by instinct. The air burned my lungs, and every heartbeat pounded like a drum in my ears. The streets I passed through were empty, as if the city had vanished suddenly, leaving me alone with that thing. Suddenly, a flicker made me stop. A few feet ahead, next to a flickering street lamp, I saw a figure. It was him. I don't know how he got there. I didn't hear him, didn't see him coming, but he stood there motionless, waiting for me. The hat still covered most of his face, but I didn't need to see it. I knew. It was the same man, and this time his hand no longer hid what he was holding. A large rusted knife, the kind you see in old butcher shops, hung from his fingers. The blade caught the light from the lamp, throwing flashes that blinded me for moments. I froze, like my feet had sunk into the pavement. Then he lifted his head, his face. I can't fully describe it. It wasn't just pale. It was ash-like, with skin clinging to his bones and cracked lips. But the worst were his eyes. They didn't shine. They were hollow, like bottomless pits. And his smile. It was the smile of someone who knew I had no way out. He didn't say a word. He just started walking toward me slowly, dragging his feet, but with a determination that chilled my blood. I tried to move, but I couldn't. Fear had me locked in place. With every step he took toward me, the air grew thicker, the world seemed to shrink, and then he broke the silence. A laugh, dry, coarse, like from a throat unused for years. That laugh tore through me, made my whole body tremble. It was like he was enjoying my fear, like he fed off it. I didn't think anymore. I turned and ran. I ran like never before. I could feel his gaze slicing into my back, felt that at any moment his hand with the knife would reach me. But something was different this time. As I ran, I realized I couldn't hear him. No footsteps, no breathing, no sound of the knife, just my desperate gasps, just my terror. I glanced back for a second just to make sure he wasn't too close, and there he was, still behind me, running now, but in a distorted way. His arms flailed wildly, and his legs moved too fast, like his body didn't know how to move like a human. That's when I understood. That wasn't a man. I don't know how my legs kept moving. Every muscle ached, every breath was like fire, but I couldn't stop. He was too close. That thing, because I could no longer call it a man, didn't tire, didn't slow, just kept coming, like it had no limits, like it would never stop. I ran toward an area I knew, a narrow street that led to some empty lots, where there used to be a house, but now only ruins, and an old wooden shed remained. I knew if I could get there, maybe I could hide, gain some time, think. As I turned onto the street, I dashed straight into the lot, leaping over broken walls and scattered blocks. Molly wasn't with me this time, and that weighed on me. But now I could only think about staying alive. I slipped behind the shed, pressing my back against the rough wood. I tried to steady my breathing, but it was useless. My heart thundered in my chest, and every second felt like an eternity. Then, silence. A silence that hurt. I couldn't hear anything. No footsteps, no laugh, no knife, just my fear pounding hard, waiting for the moment I'd see him appear. I dared to look sideways, very slowly, fearing the worst, and there he was, at the top of the street, right where I had turned. He didn't move forward, just watched me. The knife hung from his hand, and his body seemed more hunched, more unnatural. Our eyes met, and I felt time stop. There was no rage on his face, no emotion either. Just that empty expression, like I was just another piece in something he had done many times before, like he knew running was pointless. I didn't move, not an inch. I knew if I did, he'd notice, that he'd come for me without hesitation. Suddenly, something changed. Far off, the lights of a car began to light up the street. The beam of light slid slowly, cutting through the darkness. And right then, when the light touched his figure, he turned away, not running, not rushing. Just turned and started walking toward the woods, the same ones he had come from that first time. I couldn't believe it. Why was he stopping? Why was he leaving now? I didn't understand, but I didn't care. I didn't leave my hiding place until I was certain he was completely gone. Even then, I didn't move quickly. Every step felt heavy, uncertain, as if I could still sense him nearby, waiting for me around the next corner. Minutes passed, maybe hours, I don't know. Time lost all meaning while I stayed there, pressed against that wooden wall, my body shaking, my mind full of images I didn't want to remember. But when the night seemed calmer, when the wind began to stir the trees again, and the sounds gradually returned, I knew I had to leave. I stood up, legs still weak, and peeked one last time toward the street. Empty. No trace of him. No sign he had ever been there. But the fear lingered. It clung to me like a shadow, stuck to my skin. I decided I needed to get home. I took the longest route, avoiding dark streets, avoiding any place where I might see him again. Every sound startled me. Every passing car seemed suspicious. My head kept spinning, expecting to find him once more. As I neared my house, I stopped. I needed to breathe, to calm down, to make sense of what had just happened. I sat on a bench, right in front of a small park, dimly lit by a flickering yellow light. And it was there, just when I thought everything was over, that I saw him again. He wasn't close, no. He stood on the other side of the park, next to a large tree, half hidden in the shadows, but I knew it was him. I felt it in my chest, like a weight pressing down again. He didn't move, he just stared. My eyes locked with his, and that's when he did something that froze my blood. Slowly, very slowly, he raised the knife, not to attack me, not to run at me. He simply lifted it until it was level with his head, and then he turned it like he was showing it to me, like he was saying, "I'm not done with you." I don't know how long I sat there, staring at him. The park seemed empty, no cars, no people, just the two of us, and that gesture I'll never forget. Then, without a word, He lowered the knife, turned on his heels and vanished among the trees. Just like before, no rush, no fear, as if he knew he could come back whenever he wanted. I didn't move for a long time. My body wouldn't respond. My mind couldn't process what I had just witnessed. But something inside me shifted. I knew at that moment that this wasn't over, because there are things that can't be explained, things that stay with you forever. And he was one of them. When I finally felt I could move, I stood up slowly, almost without strength. I looked once more toward where he had disappeared, expecting to see him again, expecting that figure to return. But he didn't. I walked home like a ghost, not looking at anyone, not hearing anything. Every step was heavy, as if my legs no longer belonged to me. The street, which had always seemed peaceful, now felt like a maze, full of shadows and dark corners where he could be hiding. When I reached the door, I hesitated. I was afraid to go inside, afraid to find him waiting for me. But I took a deep breath, pushed the door open, and locked it behind me. I didn't turn on the lights. I just collapsed onto the couch, hugging my knees, trembling. Molly came running, wagging her tail, happy to see me. But even she noticed something was wrong. She sniffed my hands, my face, then stayed by my side, still looking at me with those big, shining eyes. I thought about calling someone, telling my mom, Mrs. Thompson, a friend, but what would I say? That a man had chased me with a knife and then disappeared like he was never there. No one would believe me. I barely believed it myself. That night I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, that gray skin, those hollow eyes, and the raised knife. I got up 1,000 times to check the window, convinced I would see him standing there at the corner, watching me again. But he wasn't, or so I thought. Days passed, and I tried to carry on. I started running again, but only during the day, and never near that trail. I avoided everything that reminded me of that night. But the fear was still there, hidden, waiting for its moment to come back. One afternoon, as I walked down the main street in the neighborhood, I saw Mrs. Thompson watering her plants. I approached, and she smiled, like nothing had happened. "And Molly?" I asked. "She's fine," she said, "but she hasn't wanted to go out for days. She just stays by the door, like she's waiting for something." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and kept walking. But as I moved away, I felt that sensation again, the same one that overwhelmed me on the trail, that invisible gaze that grips your neck, telling you you're not alone. And that's when I realized he was still close, that this wasn't over, that it never ended. Weeks went by, but the fear remained. I didn't run anymore. I didn't go out after dark. I felt like a prisoner of something I couldn't see, but I knew it was still following me. Every shadow, every dark corner of the house felt like a threat. I slept with the lights on, and still, I felt like any moment he would appear. But it wasn't until one morning that everything made sense again. I decided to go for a walk. I needed air. I took a different route, avoiding any street that might take me near the trail. But at one corner, I overheard two neighbors talking. "Someone's been leaving strange things along the old road," one said. "Seems like that crazy guy from the woods is around again," the other muttered. My body tensed. I felt like I had to go, that if I didn't, I'd never truly escape. I walked slowly, dreading every step forward. When I reached the start of the northern trail, I stopped. Everything looked the same, the dirt, the trees, the silence, but something was there that hadn't been before. I approached carefully, my heart pounding, and that's when I saw it. Hanging from the lowest branch of a mesquite tree, there was a piece of cloth, old, dirty, torn. I stepped closer, and a chill ran down my spine. It was exactly like the jacket he had worn. It couldn't be a coincidence. The fabric swayed gently in the breeze, like it was signaling me, like it was reminding me that I should never have come here. I looked around, expecting to see him, to hear his laugh, but nothing happened. And yet, something inside me shifted again. I knew he hadn't left, that he never really did, that even if I couldn't see him, he was still there, watching, waiting. That cloth was just a warning, a mark, a reminder that I was trapped. I left quickly, without looking back, and since then, I've never gone near that place again. Now every time I pass nearby, even from a distance, I feel his presence, like he follows me wherever I go, like he left something in me that can't be erased. I don't know who he was. I don't know if he was a man, a spirit, or something worse. But what I do know is that there are things that should never be seen, that there are paths that should never be taken, and sometimes fear doesn't fade. It just learns how to stay.